Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. This podcast contains frank discussions about the body, sexuality, and occasionally uses swear words, which may not be appropriate for people under the age of 18. This podcast also uses facts, statistics, and mathematics, which may not be appropriate for liberal arts majors. And this podcast relies on science and reality, which may not be appropriate for evangelicals. Welcome to Fat Chicks on Top. You are here with your host, Auntie Vice. I'm here with Cheyenne Davis. They are a content creator, a cultural critic. They've taught at NYU. They have a fabulous Instagram page. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Before we start, and this is completely not on any of the topics we talked about, where'd you learn to do your makeup? Because it is always on point.
Well, there's kind of a story behind that. And I don't want to start off too sad, but in 2013, my father passed away while I was in college, and I was going through a lot. I was very angry. I was just going through the motions of grief, especially in that first year. And so one of my good friends, who was also an RA for the building that I was living in while I was in college, pulled me aside to listen, Cheyenne, I understand. I lost my grandmother, so I get it. She was like a mother to me. However, I want to tell you something. In this season, you have to be kind to yourself. And I don't know what ways that'll work for you. I know what has worked for me, but I can't speak for you. But find something that's going to make you feel good about yourself and be kind to yourself. And so the thing that I chose to be kind to myself was makeup. So oftentimes when I'm sad or if I'm feeling away, or even just to bring my spirits up, even not even just in general, because I like doing my makeup, it's always been something that has really kind of just brought me back together in a way to practice a level of self-care and kindness.
I love that. And it looks phenomenal. Like, it was one of the first things that jumped out when I was going through your Instagram page. I'm like, this one's always put together. You know, they know exactly what to do. And as somebody who's not very good at that, I really deeply appreciate the skill involved.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Lots of you too.
Yeah.
In practice, for sure.
You're a journalist. You're a cultural critic. How did you start down that path?
I started journalism and cultural criticism in college, where I was blogging. I had a blog called The Cheyenne Hour, where I was just writing about my experiences as a fat Black person, whether it be dating, whether it be just life, whether it be anime, things like that. And then I hosted a body positive event at Rutgers. I went to Rutgers undergrad. I hosted a body positive event. They needed a last minute host, so that they called me in, and I was interviewed by the Daily Targum, which is Rutgers newspaper. And so I told them about the work that I did and the writing I was doing. So they did some research on me, and then they emailed me like a week later, like, Cheyenne, we really enjoy your work. We would like for you to write for us. So basically, would you like to adapt what you're writing already for a column? So I wrote a weekly column for them entitled The Cheyenne Hour, where I talked about like sugaring. I talked about how important makeup was. I talked about a bunch of different things. And so that's where I started with journalism. But then I didn't really start getting paid for it until 2020, because I just graduated from grad school with my master's at the time. And they kept talking about how they were going to help us find employment and help us find opportunities. And those opportunities never came to be. So I'm like, I got to make money out of pay my rent. I have to do something. So I turned to freelance journalism, where I really first started was writing about different dating apps and their fat friendliness. But obviously that was to be smart, because none of this shit is fucking fat friendly. Like, let's be honest. I basically kind of wrote a tongue-in-cheek column about the fat friendliness of dating apps. And then I kind of explored writing about kink and sex and all types of stuff. And that's basically where I started. I now have even added more of like the media representation / criticism, because I teach a course at NYU it's called Marginalized Communities in Media. It's about the intersections of marginalized communities, white supremacy, and how white supremacy influences media and also influences the lives and the representation of those very communities that are often underrepresented. I still do that work both in class and outside the classroom, because I think it's very important. I've started doing that work on TikTok, and it seems to be hitting some people there. One of the pieces of content I did recently was I uploaded some old slides I did on King of the Hill and how King of the Hill was a perfect representation of white supremacy and just whiteness in general, because it's truly a satire and folks really enjoyed that one. So I think one of my niches on TikTok is definitely the media/cultural criticism, and I'm going to stick to that.
When did you really start to recognize the anti-fatness, anti-blackness in media? Because you have an extended post on Instagram about Studio Gilby. Gilby, I never pronounced that right. My apologies.
And I understand.
Because like you, I grew up loving the films that came out of that. So when did it start really jumping out at you?
I think what really, like I tell my students, we have to start, in order for us to critique the stuff that we're consuming, we also have to be open to critiquing the ways in which we respond to things outside of what we're seeing. And that means that you have to acknowledge who you are and your identities. So even in the first day of class, I have them do an intersectionality checkpoint where they break down their different identities and how they're oppressed and privileged. I also participate too, because I want to show, listen, like, this is work that I do 24/7. And you're not alone in doing this work. I say that to say this: you have to have an understanding of who you are as a person and how that impacts the ways in which you navigate on this planet. So I think what really clicked for me was that I had to first allow myself the opportunity to see myself for who I was as a fat Black person and hold that and not feel ashamed of that. And then I was able to see the nuances in the content and the things in content that didn't necessarily make sense, but they were kind of weird. And just being able to like see that from a different perspective, because I was seeing myself from a different perspective.
You teach at NYU, with beyond being just a school where it's cost a ton of money to go to and you've got to be in the upper echelons to get into, it also has a really important film school. Mm-hmm. How have students received your work and learning about intersectionality and representation in film?
Well, I teach at Steinhardt. I don't teach at Tisch, unfortunately. I wish I could teach at Tisch, but I don't have an MFA, and you know how bureaucratic institutions can be. I do have a master's, but I don't have a terminal degree. My students, it was kind of hard for them, especially in the first semester. And it was even hard for me too. This was different for me. This is my first time really teaching people who weren't that much younger than I was. Because I started teaching when I was 27. I turned 29 next week. So to be very young teaching at a school like NYU is already something different. Number two, I'm a Black person doing it. Number three, I'm a gender expansive person doing this, and I'm not thin. So all these things, it's like when you come in class or when they log on to Zoom or whatever, because I teach online now, they're not used to that. And I also articulate for them, I know y'all are not used to having people who look like me teach you. That is something that you definitely have to work through. And again, that is work that you may always have to do even beyond this classroom. However, understand that the reason why you may see things differently is because of a lack of representation. I in my practices, I'm all about honesty. I'm very honest with my students. I'm not the most respectable teacher. Like sometimes I show my tattoos. Obviously, I have my piercings in when I teach. I curse sometimes when I teach. I don't give a fuck because, again, like that's not the person I am, and I'd be doing a disservice to them if I didn't show up authentically. Because if we're talking about authenticity and we're talking about things like representation, why would I water myself down when I'm telling you not to be accepting of watered down representation? I don't want to be that watered down representation and then tell you otherwise. Like, that makes no sense. But in terms of the reception of of the class, students overall have really enjoyed the class. I've never had a class where it wasn't full. I've never had a class where people were begging to join the class. Even now, this is my last semester teaching because I need a break. Teaching about white supremacy is a lot. I also have other goals and dreams I want to dig into that is outside of NYU, and that's okay too. But truth be told, I've had some students, especially talking about fat phobia. That is a lesson that folks really it's very difficult for them to conceptualize, and it's very difficult for them to hold on to. And I told them that this may be a more difficult topic for y'all to really get, because number one, people still don't get the fact that even wanting to lose weight has a level of fat phobia attached to it, number one. And number two, fat phobia is still the fear of fatness. And people are like, well, I'm not afraid of being fat. I'm like, but you're going on a diet every day and you're talking about how big you've gotten. you are very much afraid of being fat, and you're not necessarily being afraid of fat because of the health component. That's a part of that too. It's more so people understand the ramifications around being fat and the consequences that come with being fat. Understanding that fatness is viewed as an amalgamation of poor choices. And that whatever, because you made poor choices, you deserve to be treated poorly. People may not know how to articulate that, but we have been internalized to think, okay, if I'm big, people will make fun of me. People won't love me. People don't want to be my friend. The doctor's not going to treat me well. There's a series of unfortunate events that comes with that. So of course you're afraid, because you know on the other side of the scale number getting larger and larger, that means that your opportunities for protection, safety, love, community get smaller and smaller. So it's one student got so angry with me about it that she emailed me and was like, your words are assumptions, your teachings are assumptions. And like, you basically saying I didn't know what I was talking about. So I reminded her, number one, NYU asked me to curate this course. She doesn't know this, but I emailed them on 2 cold emails and a prayer. And I was able to teach this course. So like, you don't know what type of bitch I am. Like, you don't know who I am to even be like doing all that. Number one. Number two, I told her, like, when we learn about white supremacy, there's a level of discomfort that happens, especially when you're confronted with the truth from a person who represents that truth to you. So it's like, and a lot of times when fat people talk about fat phobia, people don't take us seriously because it's like, okay, well, you're fat. You're just saying that because you feel bitter about being fat. Okay, but where does that animosity come from? You should be angry too that a human being is being treated poorly, regardless of what size they are. I gave her the resources. We have a course resource list that's outside of the course that folks can use to further their education with. It's ever growing. I let them have it, and I keep it up there for subsequent semesters, and I tell them to download it or keep it as needed. And I basically told her that she had to sit with whatever she was feeling and process it in a healthy and respectful way. And that if she had any other questions, she knew where to find me. And then at the end of the semester, she really, in her project, she talked about how she was appreciative that she took this course because it really taught her about what judgments look like and how she, in a lot of ways, is being judgmental. So, and I told them the work is not done after class. The work is not done after the semester. This is lifelong. I'm going to the grave with this shit work. And there's some days where even I don't want to do the work. There's some days where even I have to fight my own internalized fat phobia or my internalized anti-Blackness or misogynoir, so on and so forth. So overall, students really have received it well. I've only had like 1 or 2 students that were very much like, about it, but then they came around. But for the most part, students do enjoy this class. I will miss seeing the students have those aha moments, because it is really a beautiful thing when it finally clicks for people. And it's like, oh, wow, like, I didn't even know this was a thing. One of the biggest, sorry if I'm going on a tangent, but one of the biggest realizations for students is when I teach them about sex work and how sex workers are a marginalized group too. They don't even realize that sex workers are a marginalized group. So even talking about sex work from that context, especially when you think about it from an intersectional context, especially when you think about it from a media representation standpoint, because I have them watch Pretty Woman before the class, and then I have them watch Zola after the class, and then I have them compare the 2 films to really understand how, number one, sex work has changed and shifted over the years. Because because even though people do street-based work still, it's not. We have digital platforms now where people can just do sex work in the comfort of their own home at this point. And also just talking about how basically Pretty Woman was literally a Disney film at this point, because it was on Disney Plus at one point, but it's literally a Disney film, if you think about it. And that Zola was really a different interpretation of how sex work was viewed, especially Black women sex workers. How Zola, even though she saved the white people and everybody else in the film, was still vilified by Stephanie, the white woman, at the end of the day. And that is based on a true story. And how even Zola herself was a critical part of Twitter having threads, because Twitter did not have threads until she told her story. So even the fact that this layered that there was media advances being made by this person who is the character and the story of the film that we're watching, on top of the sex work and the anti-Blackness, there's a lot of layers that I like to show my students. The reason why I chose that film is because there's so many layers to unpack. It's so interconnected into the course itself.
You touch on several things I want to go back to and touch on. So you talk about internalized fat phobia, internalized racism, all of that. We all carry it.
For sure.
When did you really start the work of unpacking your own?
I started in college. I took a feminism class, but the issue is that most college classes do not teach fat phobia. I'm actually one of the college classes like in the country. To be honest, I'm not even trying to exaggerate or try to like gloat, but it's true. There aren't, because even NYU said at some point they were considering if they had the budget to have me teach a bodies class, just body politics and media class, which I was open to. Maybe now not so much because I need a break and I want to focus on other things. But I kind of learned about the anti-Blackness thing. I kind of learned about other intersections. But I will say, when going to college in 2013, the language is very different and more inclusive, I believe, than it was then. But a lot of my education really came from the internet, came from other fat Black activists. So Crutches and Spice, Ashley Chubby Bunny, Gervais, a bunch of different people who have done a lot of work, especially around fat Black liberation, especially around fat Black disabled liberation. If we're talking about Crutches and Spice of Monty Barbarin, I tell my students all the time, and I even remind myself that the fact that we limit education to academia is a disservice to all, because again, we know that, and it's on purpose, because academia is truly limited. It's very cishet white male, so you're not getting that education of a fat Black experience, of a queer Black experience, of a queer person of color or an indigenous experience, or a fat experience, even disabled experience. You're not getting all of that because it's so limited. So that's why we have to turn the things to the internet. That's why we have to turn inward to ourselves, to our communities, to people around us, because it's not just about empirical data. Empirical data numbers are important, but I don't think that they should be considered as more important than the actual narrative data of the spoken word, of the story, of the experience. That stuff is very important, and it goes hand in hand with the empirical data. So I will say there have been some changes in the academia, because I was thinking about applying for my PhD, and I noticed that there are a lot more PhDs that are now looking at looking at narrative style PhDs and not so much the quantitative PhDs, which is cool to see. But I think that we still have so much more work to do in academia to really make it more inclusive, especially when it comes to the course offerings. I will say this again, most of my education has come from the internet, and obviously any education should be vetted, even the stuff that you're learning in academia. That's why I tell my students, whether I tell you something, whether you tell each other something, or somebody else tells you something, you should still interrogate it. I said, there's times where I've been wrong, and I'll come back and say, listen, I learned something new about this. I want to tell y'all. I do that all the time. Last semester, I clarified that neurodivergence is not necessarily considered a disability, nor is deafness. Deafness is a community, so they don't consider themselves as disabled. So I came back and told my students that this is what I learned, and I want to share what I've learned with y'all. So whatever I said prior, that was my knowledge before, but that's okay. You can learn more and grow. Being wrong is not necessarily a problem, especially when you're learning new information. It happens all the time. So interrogate whatever piece of information you receive, but understand that we should not be valuing one over the other because one stands for having this level of like being erudite, or having a level of like, oh, I got a paper to talk to you about this. No, most of the shit I talk to them about, I learned from other people on the internet. I just have the paper to secure the job, but most of the things I'm telling them are stuff that like I've experienced myself or I've seen other people experience.
So being outspoken about being fat and Black and pro fat and Black on the internet can be a difficult place, to put it mildly.
Oh, yeah, very mildly.
Very, very, very mildly. How do you manage to navigate that? Because you're very outspoken and you do not buffer it, but I also haven't seen you get flooded with hate. So how are you navigating the internet?
Oh, I've gotten flooded with hate, maybe on other people's platforms that are larger than mine. Absolutely. One article I just wrote, and I found this out too, because I was getting harassed for like weeks after I wrote the article about fat Black AI art. And the reason is because Candace Owens went on a rant about the article. I didn't even know she went on a rant. And like, so one of the people I interviewed was like, I don't want to trigger you, but Candace Owens got a hold of this, and that's why we were all being harassed. I've had people reach out on my NYU email and tell me how much of a disgrace I was. I've had people tell me that I was going to die before 25, and joke's on you, I turn 29 next week, so fuck you. especially when I did the Diet Starts Today podcast, or Diet Starts Tomorrow, excuse me, podcast, where I talked about traveling in a fat body. I received so much hate, so much so that they had to delete the comments and turn them off. I had like over almost 300 comments ripping me to shreds, misgendering me, ripping me to shreds, saying that I was delusional, saying that if I could afford to travel, I can afford to lose weight. Yeah, I've received a lot of hate. And even when I write about a lot of different things, I still receive a lot of hate. Even if I'm not writing about fatness, I still receive a lot of hate. I know when to take the breaks that I want to take. That's part of another reason why I want to take a step back from teaching, because it's just a lot to deal with, and it's a lot to take in. And like, I need a break, and I have other things that I want to do and other things that I've been putting on hold because of whatever reason. I don't like to read comments. I usually just put the article up or let them publish the article. I go about my day. A lot of times they do find me on Twitter or a social media app and proceed to harass me. And if it's not the troll behavior, it's also the fat fetishism behavior. I've posted articles where men have found me on LinkedIn to ask me on dates. And I literally had to be like, I'm here to look for a job. I'm not here to date you. This is not the platform for that. I've received a lot of weird experiences on the internet, both as just a person in general and also as a content creator, a public figure, so on and so forth. It's a lot. If I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't.
Do you find there are places where you do get support and love and people really embracing what you're doing?
Other people who do similar work, or people who are followers of my work, or people that are like mutuals of mine or follow the work of my mutuals. That's usually where I find the support. That's usually where I find the grace. That's usually where I find the a level of safety. Because I also understand a lot of these people are also unsafe in similar ways. So it's very hard, but we try to protect each other as much as we can. But truth be told, I don't expect safety from people who don't want to give it to me, nor do I expect safety from a world that it was never made for me to exist in it properly anyway. So I take the support where I can. It can be very limited at times, but like, I think the best thing that I can do is, like my therapist tells me, is to practice self-compassion and kind of not disengage from that type of behavior.
And it is one way to really persevere, because the internet is a very mean place if you are not straight sized.
No, it for sure.
You keep mentioning things you have in the works and want to do next. So let's talk about that. For where are you going next? Because you already have quite a resume under your belt. And for people who don't understand what it's like to get a job at NYU, like, what you did is unheard of. Like, NYU doesn't just hire people out of the blue. Like, that is so impressive. So
thank you.
After pulling that off, that's a hat trick. Where are you going next?
I'm on Twitch currently. I'm actually speaking at TwitchCon. I'm moderating a panel about like budding streamers and their experiences and how to like build your brand as a budding streamer. So I'm excited for that. That's something I pitched, and I was actually surprised that they picked me, because at the time I only had like 64 followers on Twitch. Like, I just made it to 92 and I'm excited. I'm almost at 100, so that's really exciting for me. Yeah, I'm speaking at TwitchCon in Las Vegas, so I'll be in Vegas next month. So I'm very excited for that. I'm writing a book right now. Really excited about that. It's about Black fat witches in the 20s. It's actually a book that's a part of a series. It's technically a prequel, but I'm really excited about that. The writer's strike is happening. One of my dreams is to be a screenwriter and a showrunner. That's what I went to grad school for. So I haven't really touched my scripts, but I want to return to them and kind of tweak them and keep writing them so that when the time comes, I can try to find a way to submit it. And I hope that with the new terms that they make more opportunities for unsigned writers or new writers to kind of break into the field, because I would love to take that opportunity and just run with it. What else am I doing? Thinking about cannabis entrepreneurship is something I've been thinking about. I've also been doing pole dancing, but I haven't been in a few months. I don't want to go back because I really enjoyed it. What else am I doing? It's just being a bad bitch. That's pretty much what I'm doing right now. And writing and, just being a bad bitch.
I know you are a fan of anime, and that's been a big, big part of what you do. Let's talk a little bit about anime. What are some of your favorites?
Okay, good question. So one of my favorites is Sailor Moon. I have a tattoo for that. Sorry, I have a little burn because I burned myself. I was baking cookies. But this is the tattoo of Luna. I also have a Naruto tattoo right here and a ramen bowl. I love Naruto's not my favorite though, but my favorites, my top are Sailor Moon, Cowboy Bebop, which I also have a tattoo for right here. Yu Yu Hakusho. In terms of Studio Ghibli films, I like Howl's Moving Castle, Kiki's Delivery Service, Ocean Waves. Ocean Waves is a very like it's like an indie one that was made by a group of young people at Studio Ghibli. It was like it's a cult classic. It's in Japanese audio only. It's really good. It's like it's a slice of life coming of age film. I'm trying to think what else I like. Castle in the Sky is really good. Porco Rosso is really good. I like most of their films, to be honest, at Studio Ghibli, but that's anime wise. I feel like I love more. There's a couple more that are escaping me right now. There's another anime called Paranoia Agent that's really good. It's one of my favorites. I also like love Death Note. And I just like and the current anime that I'm watching right now is Jujutsu Kaisen. It took me a long time to get into. Like I haven't really been a fan of the newer anime for whatever reason, but like I've started recently getting into I had to really sit with this one and now I really enjoy it. I also really like Dr. Stone. Dr. Stone is really good. I recently watched another anime called Odd Taxi. Odd Taxi is about like animals. I don't want to say that because that's a spoiler. They're animals, and it's basically about a taxi driver who encounters like a gangster and it becomes a whole big thing. It's really good. Spy X Family is cute too. I didn't really like season 2, but season 1 was great. I said Dr. Stone, Ranking of Kings. Ranking of Kings is about a deaf and nonverbal little boy named Boji who's supposed to be next in line, but they switch for his brother instead because his brother is verbal and he can hear. So just even the ableism in that is interesting to see and how he overcomes that is very cool. And I also like how other characters sign to him when they speak to him. I also think that's great. But yeah, I've always been a big fan of anime, always been a big fan of cartoons. Powerpuff Girls, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Ed, Ed and Eddie, Johnny Bravo, stuff like that. Doug, Hey Arnold, Rugrats, stuff that all those shows. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
With anime is really can be quite guilty of racism, fat phobia, sexism
Yeah.
in their representation, especially the older
Yeah.
ones are really over the top. So since you've started doing all the internal work on dismantling racism, fat phobia, and all that's been internalized,
Mm-hmm.
how is it to rewatch those shows? Because it kind of becomes glaringly obvious at some point.
Before I touch that, there's another anime that really pissed me off with the fat phobia that was in it. And it pissed me off because the anime was so good and didn't need it. This anime is called To Your Eternity. To Your Eternity is about this character where the character is brought into the world by this god named the Observer, and he comes into this world as a just a floating thing, and then he touches a rock and becomes a rock. Then he touches a dead wolf and becomes a wolf. So everything he touches that passes, he becomes it. So it's basically about like death, rebirth, afterlife, all types of stuff, love, friendship, betrayal. Like when I tell you, Auntie Vice, when I tell you I've never seen a pilot and just cried. Like I sobbed after the first episode. And I remember crying pretty much the whole first season. I was so invested. We get to the second season and there's a storyline about a prince who could see ghosts. And there was this court girl that was in love with him. And she was fat and they thought that she was a man because of her fatness. And then they found out she was a girl and they were like, well, she's so big. And then she loses weight and becomes beautiful and they get married. So I was infuriated because like, number one, what does this have to do with the story? The story is so beautifully told and crafted. We could have just stuck with that. And he could have fell in love with her as a fat person. Why did that have to be a problem? And number two, people don't even think that tarnished the storyline because people think that fat phobia is so pervasive and so readily acknowledged and accepted that people would much rather just have that in content than just to do away with it and just give the content what it needs. Now, that's in the newer anime, but it's even worse in the older ones, like you've said. So, for example, Porco Rosso, I talked about this in a post, how basically the whole thing, he's a fucking pig. And it's like, oh, he's disillusioned by humanity, so let's turn him into a pig. What does that mean? And I also feel like Hayao Miyazaki has some weird biases around fatness because every villain he has is mostly fat. Every person that has to learn a lesson has to be fat first. So even the fact that we're treating fatness as a lesson to be learned and rectified is even interesting. When we talk about Sailor Moon, there's an episode in Sailor Moon where in the first season, the Negaverse had a gym, and the gym was sucking up everybody's energy. And Sailor Moon kept talking about how she was getting fat and she wanted to lose weight because she was eating up everything. But she was still a thin girl, and this is also not an adult. She was fucking 13. We have to put in the perspective that Sailor Moon, yes, they looked older, but they were kids. They were still teenagers. And she was younger than the ones that the older girls, like Sailor Mars and Jupiter and all of them, they were older than she was. They were like 16, 17. They're still kids. At the end of it, she did talk about loving your body regardless. We did get something out of it, but at the end of the day, the fact that it's just thin people that you're telling to love your body regardless. We have to talk about how the messaging is only tailored to certain bodies, and that still reinforces fat phobia because a thin person can love their body regardless. They're not going to be fucking shamed for it. A fat person is delusional when they love their bodies regardless. So if she was a fat person, she would not be saying that.
And as you add on layers of intersectionality, as you add on race and colorism and gender and sexual orientation and gender expression,
that part,
much more complex. Because if you are a straight-sized, a little on the larger side of the straight-sized white woman, heterosexual, femme presenting, yeah, that's easy to find messaging about love your body. But
of course.
Right? It gets more complex the more we go on. In what you're watching, especially in anime areas, are you finding any positive representation for fatness, for blackness, for any of that?
The one show that I really liked that I wouldn't necessarily, she broke out of jail, but like Michiko Hatchin is one of my favorite anime. It's very incredibly slept on. It's with a black lead. Michiko is a black woman. It takes place in like a fictional version of Brazil. So I think it's really good. Now, obviously, making black people gangsters and stuff is a very interesting take. But at the same time, I still feel like it's great representation for black people. Then you have other anime. I didn't finish this one, but Cannon Busters has black people in it. There are a couple other anime, too, that have black people in it as well. But some of it is very brief. I know that The Promised Neverland had a couple of black kids in it. That show was wild. The second season was trash, but the first season was very good. I finished that recently too. I would say that anime could do a lot better when it comes to black folk, and that we do have some anime houses now that are run by black people that are making anime both in the US and in Japan. But I do feel like they could do a lot better in terms of like highlighting fat characters and not making them the butt of the joke, but actually just making them characters that exist simply because they get to exist like everybody else. Just trying to figure out ways that we can bring forth more fat black characters that are not so one-dimensional in one note. There aren't many, but I hope that we can work towards a better future where we can have more representations.
Yeah, in the stuff that I watch, it really seems like anime is a little behind the curve on catching up on representation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you seeing things outside of anime that you think, oh, this is fantastic? This is like...
I haven't really watched it, but I've seen some of Craig of the Creek. And Craig of the Creek has one of the characters that I believe is also deaf, and they signed him, and I believe he's black too, so that's cool to see. They did the Proud Family reboot. I didn't see the reboot yet, but I heard that the reboot talks about a lot of different... Okay, I have to watch it. It talks a lot about a lot of different things. Trying to think what else I saw that I really thought... In terms of blackness, I do enjoy P-Valley. P-Valley is really good. I love that Uncle Clifford is a person that's technically non-binary. I believe the person that plays them is also non-binary in real life. I'm trying to think what other shows that I've looked at and said I actually like how they approach the characters in The Bear, because the racism is not necessarily an issue. They found a way to make the kitchen the issue, and that the people are just black people playing a role or people of color playing the role, and they're leads. Now, I will say that I wish that we could kind of get more from Sid. I think whoever's writing Sid's character, we should try to get more, especially like I really want her and Marcus to be together. Like I feel like they'd be perfect for each other. Like, and people online are like, well, no, Sid and Carmi are perfect. I'm like, no, they're not. Carmi is not consistent enough for her, and she's too anxious. She needs someone that's gonna really like be patient. And Marcus is the only one that knows how to be patient, that knows how to say the right thing at the right time. I just think they make a perfect couple. And even when they both left the bear, just even that moment where they connected and she made that scallop food for him, like I'm like, why are they not? I'm like, my heart, why are they not dating?
I will jump in. Yes, I saw that scene. I'm like, please develop a love story there. That was so good. And
like
Sid is so amazing.
Yes. Like, what are y'all doing? Carmi and her are literally co-workers. Literally co-workers who you could tell that they're developing a friendship. They're trying to trust each other, but they both had deeply rooted trust issues. And when Carmi fucked up that relationship with Claire, I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I understand that and then when I'm sorry, but when Richie cursed him out and Richie was pissing me off until he staged at that restaurant and became a whole new man, I was like, yeah, I like this glow up for him. I also like how Tina had to glow up. Like, because Tina was very mean at first, but then she had to get over herself. And Sid still gave her a chance to be like a sous chef. Like, I really like that too. But when he cursed Carmi out for fucking that shit up with Claire, Carmi deserved that. Why? But at the end of the day, Carmi again has deeply rooted issues. His mother, Jamie Lee Curtis, is the sister, this Sugar was pregnant. Like, and the mother didn't even know that Sugar was pregnant. Like, season 3, whenever it comes out, is going to be really intense, really messy. And even Marcus going to the Netherlands, like just in the ways in which each character was able to grow in different ways, I really appreciated that. I think the show has great writing. I think the show has great potential. And I think even though there may be some times where there was undertone of race, like when Richie was coming at Sid, I was like, I don't know. I don't like how you doing that, champ. But Richie was nasty to everybody. So like it is what it is. But I do like that they didn't make the primary issue of the show racism or any type of oppression. It was more so this man is grieving. These men are grieving because Richie's also grieving too, because Mike was one of his best friends. These men are grieving. These people are grieving. They're all grieving something. Marcus's mother is about to pass. Sid's mother died, and she's grieving the loss of her catering career and trying to figure out her worth as a chef. Like Tina was trying to understand who she was as a person and a chef, and she's kind of taking care of her son on her own. And he's getting into trouble. And then the man that was a Somali refugee, he kind of gave up on himself, but then he came back to run the takeout menu, the takeout section. So like, I really think that the show does a great job of showing people as human and not human because of who they are, and not people that are being bombarded with trauma porn because of their experience. Because a show that really pissed me off with the first episode, and I really wanted to like the show, but I just couldn't get into it, was This Is Us. Because why in the first episode is Kate contemplating whether or not she should eat the cake, and then proceeding to think about losing weight? Why? Eat the fucking cake. And I've written about this too. That really pissed me off.
Yeah, eat the cake needs to be a tagline. Like, don't stress over it. I know it's more complex for people who have diabetes and other health issues.
Absolutely.
But eat the fucking cake.
And that's different, but she didn't have those issues.
Right.
Kate was a fat woman who was married and who lost her father. She was grieving too and trying to figure her life out. It didn't take all of that. Why can't she? And then even the fact that we're leaning into weight loss, like, I be telling people, it's the fact that we treat fat characters as weight loss totems is really problematic for me, because we also have to remember that, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping from topics, but that just really made me think about something. We have to remember that media is still a form of propaganda. It's still a form of messaging. And even if it's not, and it's intentional, because again, it's intentional because people are literally writing scripts, and whatever is written that you're seeing has to be approved, and it has to be approved because they have to attribute $1 to it. Like when people, like for example, when you have a script a producer comes in and they itemize the stuff that you talk about in the script to make sure that they can afford it in the budget. So clearly whatever's being seen was kept for a purpose. So even the fact that you have messaging now, it is still for a greater purpose. And we also got to think about what sells and what doesn't. Does a show about people feeling empowered in their fatness, is that really going to sell? Especially in a world of, I'm going to take Ozempic to be thin, regardless of diabetic people need this medication, and I don't care if they don't have it or not. Do you really think that's going to sell?
I mean, the money, and a couple episodes ago, we had Tigress Osborne on from the National Association for Advancement. Yeah. And Tigress pointed out that the only money around fatness in research or sell is weight loss.
It's weight loss and dieting. Yeah, that's what. There's no research in life preservation of fatness, but there's recent studies that are showing that fat people are outliving thin people. So even the fact that but again, there's more money in weight loss because there's more money in putting people in vicious, hopeless cycles. You know that 90%, like 90 to 95% of diets do not work at all. Yet you still tell people you could try again, you could use this pill, you could do this medication, you could do Weight Watchers, you could do Jenny Craig, you could run to this gym, you could run to that gym. Y'all know that that's still burning up people's money in pockets. But people would rather run themselves to the ground than to be fat. People would rather be sick and dying than to be fat. And it's doctor approved because your doctor would rather you be sick and dying than be fat. Cool. You owe me more money because now I'm like, all of a sudden, I can find what's wrong with you. You could have been found out what's wrong with me. There are people I know that were fat that kept being told they needed to lose weight. And then they find out 6 months later that they have like stage 2, stage 3 cancer. Why? So y'all rather have a malpractice lawsuit than to treat the issue ahead of time so people could fucking live? It's weird. It's disgusting. It's vile. It's grossly inappropriate.
It is. And it's the running theme on the show, as I have yet to meet a fat person, let alone a fat, black, femme-bodied person who can get decent medical care in this country.
Oh, I have not. I just recently got my fibroid removed. The doctor was cool. He did name me as obese on my records. I'm like, whatever, but he didn't say that to me. He just took care of me. So I appreciate him still. He did a great job. I found great medical care to remove my fibroid. But prior to that, I went to a doctor who's considered one of the best doctors in the state as an OBGYN. And she told me, because I told her I had no appetite, I was not feeling well. She said to me that it was good that I was not eating because I needed to lose weight and that my body needed to go into ketosis. This woman told me to basically starve myself. That's what she told me. And also on top of that, she was like, well, are you eating a lot of sugary foods? Are you like insinuating what I said, listen, I'm not eating anything. And even if I did, what does it matter? No. And I told her, I said, you see my blood work is pretty much impeccable. What are you talking about? But even if it wasn't impeccable, that's the other thing. Fat people don't need to prove. Because a doctor is there to do what? They should be treating your ass regardless of you a size 2 or a size 30. They should be treating you, and they should be treating you with the utmost respect and care. It also, I found out when you are a doctor in medical school, they even tell you if a person is of size, you have to run more tests because the weight is not going to be indicative of anything. I'm like I'm 300 pounds plus. I'm not diabetic, even though it runs in my family. So if it happens at whatever point, I could be at any size and still get it. My sister-in-law has diabetes and she's thin. Type 2, but it doesn't matter. Why are we not treating people with care? Why are we not coming to people? And again, I know that everybody don't got no bedside manner, but it seems like most doctors don't have a bedside manner when it comes to fat people. So I'm trying to learn even for myself to be comfortable enough to be like, thank you, but I don't want to pursue this any further and walk out and file a complaint. I filed a complaint with the board against that doctor. Telling someone to go into ketosis is very dangerous. And it's also violent. Anti-fat bias in medicine is not only just uncomfortable, it's violence because you're telling me that you'd rather me die than to be fat. And you'd rather treat the fatness than the issue at hand. So that's why you wondering why people be so sick after they lose all that weight, or why you are recommending people for bariatric surgery, which if that goes wrong, which it often does, you waive your right to sue because they put that in the waiver. There's so many people. I know people that have had lost loved ones, the sepsis from those procedures. I know someone that almost died and had to get their lap band removed. All of this for what?
And so much of that is driven also by the representation of fatness in medical literature, right? When you go through medical textbooks, they don't have obese people unless it's in the weight loss chapter.
Yeah, they don't
right?
they don't have them as just people learning, just people having ailments because people get sick. It's the human experience. The other issue is that I just feel that in general, we don't have enough fat representation, even when it comes to reproductive health, because I definitely want to talk about sex too, because that's important. Even when it comes to reproductive health, the fact that emergency contraception is only for certain weight limits, and that if you surpass that, you have to go get an IUD. What if a copper IUD is an emergency contraceptive? Why? Why can't I just get a pill? And that's weird to me because it also reads as, oh, like, y'all don't think fat people be fucking. We fuck.
We do.
And
we do.
Honestly, if I could fuck more, I would, because I love it. But still, we have sex. So why are y'all, even the fact that there's these insinuations that fat people don't have certain experiences is wild to me. There's something else about I remember I talked to a doctor about freezing my eggs because I didn't know if I wanted to bear children at this point or not. And also, when I spoke to the doctors about my fibroids, they said, listen, you should think about freezing eggs because fibroids have a tendency to come back even after you remove them. And you may want to plan your pregnancies. So first of all, egg freezing is very expensive. That shit is like upward almost 20 grand if you have to pay out of pocket, which Cheyenne don't got 20 grand for that. Cheyenne don't got 20 grand period, but still. Number two, when I was talking to the doctor about it, she was asking me if I wanted to get bariatric surgery. I said, why? I said, I thought we were talking about egg freezing. She said, we are, but sometimes if you're larger, we have to use more medicine. I said, well, use more medicine. Do what you need to do.
Yeah, it's abysmal how fat folks are treated in the medical profession. And it's evidenced by, how many stories have we come out where larger bodied people end up dying of things not related to fatness? Or you have Lisa Morgan Presley, they just released, she died because of complications of obesity surgery, right? She went in for
really the surgery that's killing people, not the fatness. And I'd be
right.
And I know so many people. I had a friend that was so sick after she got that surgery. She's like, I wish I never did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's insane. And then as you add on intersectionality, Sabrina Williams, peak physical, athleticism. Like, this is a woman in better shape than almost anyone in the world. Still has to save her own life while giving birth.
I remember that. Yeah, but the rate of Black women and femmes who die, Black birthers and women who die in childbirth, and not because of complications that weren't treatable, it's because of negligence of medical professionals. And also this old, nasty, vile, racist idea that Black people can withstand more pain than others and that they don't deserve the care that they should be getting is disgusting. So again, just because, yes, being a celebrity does have a level of privilege, but that is still a Black person. That is also a woman that is often subjected to transphobia because they call her a man. This is a woman that is constantly being subjected to vile words and commentary and inappropriate things and behaviors because she is a Black woman. Regardless of being the best, regardless of her being the best tennis player in the fucking galaxy.
Yep. No, it's insane to me what they get away with in medical treatment.
Correct.
And you brought up in part of it sex, which also comes into medical treatment because, again, unless you have erectile dysfunction, they do not give a shit about your sex drive.
And they don't. And also, like, sex, or if you are a person who has a vulva, the only thing they care about is your ability to conceive or anything around conception. They don't care about, okay, why am I not lubricating? And I don't care about for birth, but I'm trying to lubricate because I want to fuck. Or why do I not have sensation in my clitoris? They don't really care about those things. I feel like when it comes to even the orgasms that vulva owners have, they still have very little information around the vulva and its parts and its functions. So like, again, if you're not a penis owner, they don't care about pleasure. They don't care about none of that. And even with the contraceptions, like they don't make a lot of vulva condoms that are non-latex. Most of them are made out of latex. I'm allergic to latex. I can't use that. And y'all can understand that every penis is a different size or shape or whatever. I still feel like with vulvas, they still have very little information around how sizes are. So, and I feel like it's on purpose because people don't give a shit.
Yeah, no, I've started to think if, we could get teenage girls to draw clits on everything and like the proper representation of a clit instead of dick, maybe they would get a little more interested in it. And, it'll take forever for them to find the graffiti. For you, when did you really start learning about sex and sexuality and all of that? Because for most of us, we had a really crappy sex ed, and it definitely didn't address pleasure or fatness or dating while fat. So kind of what's your background with that?
My parents weren't always the most vocal. My dad, when I got my period at 11, he did get me like some period books, and some of the books talked about like your vulva and like looking at your vulva with a hand mirror. So I asked him to buy me a hand mirror one day. And I didn't tell him why, I just asked for one, and then I used it, and like I was like, oh, I didn't even know what it looked like. I'm like, oh, okay. I also was very big on the internet. And mind you, sneaking around on a desktop computer is so comical and so fucking unserious, but I still managed to do it. Just imagine like tween me looking to see where my parents are, typing away, reading like sex or reading like erotic fan fiction. It's like I was so curious. Also, real sex taught me a lot. Real sex is a very big important part of my childhood, where I would put the Cartoon Network on like the return channel so that when people would walk by my room, I would press return. Also watching the softcore HBO porn, which is shitty. At the time, I didn't realize it was shitty, but I still learned about it through that. Also watching movies like Secretary and Brokeback Mountain and Girl 6 are also very like big parts of me understanding sexuality and kink and things like that. Also exploring my own body as a teenager was very important too, because I didn't start having sex until I was 20. And I didn't date or anything because I was in a predominantly white school. I was Black. Like, I didn't think that people were looking at me, but then come to find out as an adult, they were, and they still are. So whole nother conversation. Definitely get into that in a bit. Yeah, as a kid, I was reading and looking and researching a lot because I was just curious about it. And I was always a kid and a person, but still as an adult, if I want to know something, I will learn everything about it. And if I don't feel like I've learned enough, I'm always open to learning more.
So you are now almost 29. You're out there, you're dating. And you're in New York, correct?
I'm in New Jersey, but I'm a hop and skip. So basically New York.
Yeah. In the tri-state area.
Yes. Yeah,
what is date? I have not been on the dating scene in a hot minute. So what is it like out there for you right now?
Oof. A shit show. A pure and utter manure catastrophe. It's terrible. 0 out of 10, negative 80 out of 10 would not recommend. The apps are trash. I don't really want to do apps anymore. I do a lot better in person because like Field has those events where you can go and mingle and stuff. And I really enjoyed it. The last one I went to, I got a few numbers. It was hot. I looked hot. I was flirty. Like, listen, I'm a Virgo with a Capricorn moon, a Scorpio rising, a Scorpio stellium. I can be a huge flirt. I may not come off as such, but I love flirting, even just for the sake of it, just to do it. And I don't even necessarily want anything to come of it. I just really enjoy the energy that it gives. But I didn't always feel like I was worthy enough of that until like the second half of my 20s. The first half of my 20s, I was very uncomfortable with people flirting with me or me flirting with others. And now I'm like, yeah, flirt with me. If you're not flirting with me enough, if you're not like lusting after me enough, if you're not willing to die at a stake for how sexy I am, I don't want you. Like I don't want you at all. Like I need that. But unseriousness aside, dating is not that great. But I will say that what has helped me limit my options in a good way It's understanding my worth, going to therapy and understanding self-compassion and understanding that it's not a me problem. Because one of the things that can really be a damper to a dating experience, and one of the things that people, a lot of times, including myself, have gotten caught up in and getting hung up on, is this idea that I'm not getting dates because it's me. I'm not dating because something is intrinsically wrong with me. I'm not dating because people don't want me. Now, does desirability politics a thing? Absolutely. Fat phobia and fat fetishism, some of the best of friends, worst pair out there, some of the best of friends. It's very difficult when you fuck somebody one day and they seem into you and then they never speak to you again. It's very weird when people start off interested and then all of a sudden it wanes, especially when you hold them accountable for how they behave. Because again, people think that, oh, they're not going to say anything to me. I could just do whatever. No, I'm going to tell you about yourself. I don't feel comfortable with X, Y, and Z. And now I wasn't always like that, but I had to get to the place. And even now, sometimes I feel uncomfortable because it's like, I'm afraid that they're going to reject me or not listen to me. And it's not about that. It's ultimately about saying, hey, I don't like that you treated me in such a way. It doesn't really matter how they respond. It's about you putting that out there. Them responding is your cue for next steps. Because if you put that out there and they respond poorly, that is not a person you should be dating. Because if they can't even see your humanity, if they can't even hold themselves accountable, that's not a person you want to be with, period. So dating is trash. I don't have sex as consistently as I would like, unfortunately, because I really enjoy having sex. And I think sex is very important for me as a person. And I don't just date men like I date everybody, but just dating has just been trash. But also, like, there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on in my life. So I understand that these things can have a bunch of hiccups because people ain't got it. I ain't got it. It's okay. But I hope that I will find partners and people that I can share my life with that are worth it and understand that I am too, and that I don't have to fight to show them that, because if you got to prove shit to people, you ain't got to be with them either. So that's my take on that.
That's great. So approaching 29, it's a big birthday for a lot of folks. What's your hope? What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to on September 14th? Let's see. Definitely gonna have an orgasm, because on my birthday I have to have an orgasm. I turned a year older, whatever. I made it in this bitch, so I'm gonna come. I want to build and cultivate a life of ease, pleasure, play, joy, and rest. Because I'm often talking about all the work I want to do, and as we can see, the work gets done. I end up doing it somehow. That's how I got here, right? But I don't want to focus, especially turning 30 next year. I don't want to focus my whole life on work. I don't want to focus my whole life on the ways in which I can be useful to others or useful to my community. I do want to show up for my community, but I also want people to show up for me and continue to show up for me. I want to be able to receive more rather than give, because I've been giving a lot and doing a lot, and I don't really have the capacity to do so. So I really want to take this last year of my 20s to really give myself the things that I haven't given myself, which is time, which is patience, which is love, which is care, which is compassion. Not saying I haven't given them before in some capacity, but to give more of it and to give it unabashedly and to give it without feeling bad or feeling like I'm taking away from somebody or feeling like I'm not being enough for somebody. Because truthfully, Auntie Vice, I have to be concerned about being enough for myself. So I really want to focus on being enough and existing for myself, so that I can exist for other people, or exist with other people. Existing for myself, existing with other people.
I love that. If our listeners want to find you on all the socials, if they want to reach out, if they want to read your stuff, or if somebody wants to offer you a creative job with a 6K figure, where do they go?
Yeah, thank you for putting that out there, because the 6 figures, thank you. If they all want to reach me, you can reach me at @ShyMode. That's at CHEYMODEE. That is on all platforms. I especially would like for folks to follow me on Twitch, follow me on and interact on Instagram, follow and interact on TikTok. X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm only calling it Twitter. I've just said that just to give context. I am active on X, but it's not something I'm prioritizing. But if you want to reach out to me via email, you will find my email at all my links. So that's http://www.allmylinks.com/ShyMode. You can find me there as well.
thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a wonderful conversation. I would strongly encourage my listeners to go check out our sites. We're going to have all of those links for Cheyenne on our website and more, including one to Fat Vampire. And, as always, like, subscribe, do all the things. Thank you so much. And now, a moment of gratitude.
That's a good question. I'm grateful for my cat, Quinn. Very cute, black floof. 1 million bazillion out of 10 would absolutely recommend. Grateful for my family, my sister, my mom, my nephews, my niece, my brother, his wife. I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for my friends. A lot of them don't live near me anymore or have never lived near me, but I still love them and cherish them deeply. And I like that. I'm glad that I still get to spend time with them, even if it's just like on FaceTime. I'm grateful for my creativity because it's something that has really been a strength for me in various ways and has really helped me become the person I am today. And I'm just grateful to be able to unpack things and liberate myself from shit that don't make sense and shit that's just bullshit. Because I do feel a lot better now that I have a better understanding of who I am and my understanding, not my understanding about myself based on who others have told me to be. It's the person I want to be. So I'm really grateful to be able to live life on my own terms and really live life for what I want to do and for who I want to be.
Hi, this is your Auntie Vice here. We are coming up on the largest kink event of the year, which is Folsom Street Fair here in San Francisco, California. This year, I'm teaching 3 classes leading up to Folsom. On Wednesday, the 23rd, I will be teaching Setting the Scene with Wicked Grounds. And on Thursday and Friday, I will be teaching with the Folsom Cultural Center. And I will be teaching Dangerous Curves Ahead, from fat fetishism to fat phobia in the kink community, and on aging while kinky. So check me out. I'll have the links to the classes. Some of them are hybrid and online. If you're in San Francisco, come check me out and hit me up. Thanks very much. Okay, so for our listeners who are not familiar with the show Reginald the Vampire, it's based on the graphic novel series called Fat Vampire. Hulu turned it into a series, and it is one of the more complex representation of bodies that I've seen on film. And I let Cheyenne know because nobody's seen it. I think I am the only person who's actually seen this all the way through that I know. So what are your feelings? What are your thoughts, at least on the pilot?
I like that the person is a person of color who's also fat. I just hate that we're not 5 minutes in and we're already getting self-deprecating jokes about his fatness. He's already being called obese by a white man. He's already being downplayed by a white man. And that he's pining over a white thin woman. So even the fact that he's pining over something that he's not or can never be is very interesting to me. Now, mind you, it's not like he's necessarily chasing her. I do appreciate that they have an attraction for each other and that they really like each other. You could tell that they have a great chemistry, but I just don't like that there's this keep my eye on the prize energy that they have. Also, when Maurice and him are at the bar prior to him being turned into a vampire, Maurice says to him, basically, it's not about your body, it's about who you really are. And this messaging about people don't care if you're fat, it's about what's inside. That's not necessarily true. There are people who are attracted to fat people, and that is okay. It is okay for him to be fat and a person that's a good person. We don't need to look beyond his body to appreciate him. Another thing that was very interesting to me is that, and I haven't necessarily seen it in a show where it was fully articulated, was when Maurice said to him, listen, whatever body you die in is the body that you stay in. So I was pissed that Reggie was kind of annoyed and it was in shambles over just being the fact that he's going to die. He died a fat person, is going to remain an undead fat person. But what was really interesting about that scene was when Maurice basically broke down to him that vampires don't really accept fat vampires, and that he wanted to find out what the consequences were of him being in a circle of vampires, or being introduced into a circle of vampires because he's a fat person. So I still want to watch it. Part of me is still curious to watch it. The body politic, I wonder if it shifts over time, and that maybe, okay, does it shift over time? Okay.
Yeah, so I'll put spoiler alert warning. Most of the rest of the show is him dealing with coming to be aware of the anti-fat bias, why that's a problem. And the primary person who is pushing back against having vampires is a former Black Panther member from the 60s who was turned.
Yeah, Angela.
Yeah.
She turned Maurice.
Yep. And then Maurice, yeah, so Angela pushes back against him Reggie coming in as a fat vampire. And so the body politics of somebody who fought with the liberationist movement, who is now pushing out Reggie because of his body, becomes a really interesting dialogue. And I mean, most of it is dealing with how do we deal with this anti-fatness as well as these former liberationists, and where does that come in? And it's fascinating.
And that's actually really cool, because I was like, at first I was like, I was trying to be like, is this show trying to be fat phobic? Then I thought about it the way that Maurice articulated. I'm like, maybe there is a level of kind of critiquing how fat characters are even portrayed, because honestly, because I'm like, something is interesting about this. And I didn't necessarily feel negative about it at first, but now at first I was kind of annoyed, but now thinking about it, and as the episode progressed, I'm like, maybe there's a bigger thing here once I continue to watch the show. And it was given because, again, if the show really didn't want to challenge the anti-fatness, they wouldn't have brought up the idea of, they may push back because of your body. Like, we've never really seen that articulated openly before. So I think even the fact that that was articulated, I had to think about it, like, And I was watching it while I was talking on the phone with my friend, and I told them, I said, I think this may be, because at first they were like, is this a show that's to challenge fat phobia? I said, I don't know yet. Let me keep watching. And then when they said that, I'm like, I think there may be some challenging of anti-fat bias because Maurice brought that up to Reggie. So I will continue watching the show, because I'm like, that's very interesting that how they brought that up. Is Fat Vampire a comic about dismantling anti-fat bias?
It's a graphic novel series, and the first part, it's really good. The first part is all about Reggie waking up to that anti-fatness, which I like as a part of a fat journey, because so many of us are so steeped in anti-fatness that we do it against ourselves. We make jokes and all of that because that's what we've been taught to do.
Right.
And so as he comes to unlearn this and unlearn the racial politics with it as well, and really evolve as a character, and you see these other characters struggle with identity throughout this, and then the fact that they're undead is really hanging over him. And I love the little queer goth chick. Like, my heart goes out for.
I gotta still watch it. I'm very intrigued now hearing about how the show kind of works to dismantle anti-fatness. I want to watch it more. So I'm like, I feel like there's more to learn here. So I only watched the pilot, and that's what I gathered. And I'm realizing that those things were intentional, the ways in which he was being treated. And also it's intentional because it's like, this is a person of color, an Asian man who's fat, who works with a white coworker who's fucking insufferable. And I was hoping that he was going to kill Todd. I think his name is Todd. I was hoping he was going to kill Todd. Yes. And I was praying. I'm like, please just rip his artery, his jugular out. Do something.
Yeah, you got to keep watching. And I mean, they base it in Ohio, right? I mean, that's the other thing
and it's a very conservative state too. It's
very white,
very white,
yeah. very Midwestern. And so to set that, especially with this large group of, it's a pretty racially diverse group of vampires in Columbus, Ohio. Like, it sets it up for a lot of really interesting social commentary. And I want to talk about it because I love the way they go about it. And It is. It's one of the more complex representations I've seen of both fatness and of colorism, racism, and all of that that gets involved. But and classism will come in later on. But yeah, fascinating, fascinating series. I couldn't recommend it more highly for people. It's challenging, I think, for a lot of people. For me, by the end, I was like cheering, jumping up and down.
Is he the only fat vampire?
In this season, yes. If you read the books, it goes in, they bring in others, but it pushes the vampire community to consider their fat phobia.
Okay, cool. I definitely want to continue watching.
Texas of the world. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fat Chicks on Top. Please like, subscribe, and review our podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. If we like your review, we may even read it online. This has been an Auntie Vice production. Producer and host, Rebecca Blanton. Audio production by Sharon Smith. Music by David Manga. And more music by Sharon Smith. For more information about Fat Chicks on Top, please visit our website for all things Fat Chicks at fatchicksontop.com.